What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel, and today we need to talk about Colby Covington. But more importantly, we need to talk about why the hell he is ducking Ian Garry, and that's exactly what he's doing right now. So if you don't know, Ian Garry, when he won at UFC 299 against Jeff Neal, he called out Colby Covington and said that he was going to retire him from the UFC. And this, of course, came after Colby's shitty performance against Leon Edwards in December of last year. And Colby had a response to Ian Garry's call out. He gave him 3 stipulations that Ian Garry had to follow in order for Colby to accept a fight with him. He's pretty much saying that Ian Garry isn't a big enough name for him in order to have a fight. And Colby, he prides himself on fighting the best guys in the UFC and tells everybody that he only wants to do big fights. But the Ian Garry fight would probably be one of the biggest fights of 2024. And I mean, it's not like he didn't know who Ian was before the call-out, because he was one of the first fighters to jump on his back when all that stuff came out about his wife. And I mean, it is pretty messed up, but at the end of the day, it's really nobody's business to comment on it. And I mean, I'm not a big Ian Garry fan or anything, but like, it's something you shouldn't talk about. It's like the unwritten rule in the fight game, and it was unnecessary. But Colby knew that there was something there, and he knew he could market something off of coming out and talking about Ian and his wife, so that's why he did it. And you'd assume it'd be for the purpose of promoting a fight. This fight with Ian Garry is the fight that makes the most sense for Colby Covington, in my opinion. This is an up-and-coming contender versus a guy who's pretty much on his way out in Colby, and it's just a fight that makes sense. It's 2 big pay-per-view stars, and either way, they're going to make massive business if they were to fight each other. So I'm not too sure why Colby is super against this fight. I mean, I think I kind of know why, but either way, if he still wants to be in big fights and have big money fights, this is exactly that. I'm not going to come out here and say that Colby's scared of Ian Garry, because he's definitely not. But I think that he sees Ian as a pretty tough matchup. I mean, Ian's a long, tall guy, great kickboxer, seems to have a bit of jiu-jitsu to him. And I don't think Colby is going to like having to fight a really high-level kickboxer like that again, because last time he did that against Leon Edwards, he got dominated completely. And Colby doesn't really do well against good strikers in general. And Garry, if you take a look at the top of the division at welterweight, he might be one of Colby's tougher matchups. And Ian is a tough matchup for him, but it makes his other call out just seem even weirder. It was Charles Oliveira. He wanted to invite Charles to the division and says that a fight with him would be massive. And I don't disagree with that, because Charles is a massive star himself, but you're not going to get those press conference moments with Charles or any of that back and forth, because Charles doesn't speak English. So it would be solely reliant on how good the actual fight is. And Colby, he's not that guy. He's not an entertaining fighter. That's not why Colby Covington is a star. He's a star because of his mouth, and his mouth has gotten him all big fights that he's ever gotten, really. I mean, it's not his fighting style. He was on the brink of being cut from the UFC before he decided to talk a bunch of shit in Brazil. So I mean, he really isn't a guy that you want to see because of his fighting. So that's exactly what a fight with Charles Oliveira would be, because Charles is one of the most exciting guys in the UFC, and he doesn't speak English, so he's not going to be trash talking or anything like that. So I don't know if it's really that great of a matchup. But back to this Colby and Ian stuff, because I find it really interesting, because this is the biggest fight you could make in the welterweight division. I'm going to go and say that right now. I know technically we have Conor in the mix and stuff, but I don't count Conor, because who really even knows if he's going to have a fight after this Chandler fight? So realistically, it's Colby and Ian. They're probably the 2 biggest names in the division. It's a fight that makes sense. It's the fight that should happen, and Colby, I think, is really ducking Ian hard here. He doesn't seem to like to fight down the rankings at all. And Colby's, we haven't seen him fight in 2 years before this most recent one against Leon Edwards. His last fight before that was Jorge Masvidal. So clearly, he only wants the big fights and only wants to fight big guys. And he's definitely turned guys down in those 2 years off. I guarantee you that, because there's no way the UFC would have kept him on ice for 2 years without offering him any fights. So he absolutely turned fights down, and he just waited it out for the title shot. But he got dominated in the title fight. So he needs to go back to the drawing board. And like every other contender, you go back and you go and try and get a win or two and then get yourself back into the picture. A win over Ian Garry and potentially a finish over an undefeated prospect that's been soaring through the rankings, that's exactly what will get you back into the title picture. Not this Charles fight, although a win over Charles would be massive. It wouldn't get him back in the picture. Or a win over, I don't even know, maybe if he probably wants to do Kamaru Usman for another time. Like, this is the thing. You need to fight these top contenders that have a lot of power in the division and show that you're still one of the best in the world in order to fight for the title again. Because, I mean, he's what, 0-3 or 0-4 in title fights now? So him getting another one is pretty unlikely in general. So he has a lot of work to do, and it starts with this Ian Garry fight. As to how I think a fight between these two would actually play out, at this point, I'd probably tip Ian Garry to get the job done. I don't know if he'd finish him. I think he could finish Colby, but I think it would be really tough. I don't know, man. I was so thrown off by Colby against Leon there. And I know Leon's one of the best fighters in the UFC, but the way he performed was just so bad. It was just, he looked horrible in that fight. He looked slow. He looked sluggish. He looked a little bit like he had a bit of ring rust. So I don't know. Maybe he can come out looking a little bit better against Ian, but Ian's a pretty similar matchup to Leon. I would say that Leon's probably a better grappler and maybe a little more slick striker, but Ian Garry's still one of the best strikers in the game right now. And if he finds Colby's chin, he could probably put him out. And by the way, I don't have any pride in making this video. Colby actually is one of my favorite fighters in the UFC, but recently I'm not liking a lot of the stuff he does. I think he's really ducking Ian Garry here with all these little stipulations and everything he's trying to do in order to prevent the fight from happening. And I just think we're witnessing the downfall of Colby Covington right now. It sucks, but it's the way it is, and it's the fight game. Thank you all for watching another one of my videos. If you enjoyed it, consider liking and subscribing. Helps me out a ton. And stay tuned for more videos coming out this week. I mean, the month of June is stacked for the UFC, and there's going to be a ton of videos talking about all the upcoming fights, so be on the lookout for that. And yeah, thank you all once again for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.